Well, OnePlus has now joined the ranks of the phone manufacturers who partner with car companies to make a device. This is the OnePlus 6T McLaren Edition. McLaren, if you aren't familiar, is best known for their F1 team, which was started back in 1963 by Bruce McLaren. After racing in Formula 1 for a while, they branched out and started actually manufacturing cars for high-end consumers with the aptly named McLaren F1, which sold for about 6 years, followed by the P1 more recently. Both of these cars are still to this day some of the fastest production cars ever made. And it's with this company that OnePlus decided to create a salute to speed version of their device, to use their own words, which seems to make sense to me. Now I happen to have one of the OnePlus 6T McLaren Edition phones with me, so I figured I would try to do a complete walkthrough for you guys. Now if you're not familiar, a complete walkthrough on this channel is where I try to go through every feature I possibly can on a new device so that you guys are better prepared should you be in the market to go buy one. Now with that said, let's get started with something that is different about this version of the OnePlus 6T, if only subtly, the design. We still have Gorilla Glass 6 front and backs with an aluminum frame, similar to the OnePlus 6T's layout of course, but instead of the normal colors, we have this carbon fiber looking back with McLaren's trademarked orange color around the edges, with it getting gradually more prominent towards the bottom of the phone. And that's, well, really the only difference in styling at all. Now I have to admit, I love the way that it looks actually in a very subtle way. But the one downside is that if you're paying more for this version of the device and really want people to know that it isn't the same as the normal OnePlus 6T, they'd have a hard time knowing that from the front or any sort of distance really. Now considering most people around you will have to ask what phone it is even when it's the normal 6T version, I doubt many people who buy this model will care about that, since they'll be explaining it regardless to onlookers and can just add the McLaren name to their explanation if they want. The OnePlus 6T McLaren Edition is also using an in-display fingerprint sensor. It works by taking a photo of your fingerprint through the glass essentially, and just like the original 6T, is actually one of the fastest ones I've ever used. The display is the same 6.41-inch 2340 by 1080 resolution, 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio AMOLED screen from the 6T that, yes, also has a notch. But it's this much more subtle teardrop shape compared to some other devices that we've seen. Now in the notch, we have the same 60 megapixel f2.0 aperture front-facing camera from the OnePlus 6 and 6T that can be used for face unlock, albeit not quite the same as the IR-enabled ones from Huawei and Apple, but the one built into Android now, which is still pretty snappy, just doesn't work as well in low light is all. The front camera is capable of 1080p, and here's what that looks like, along with what the microphones sound like. At the bottom of the screen, we have a slightly smaller chin, just like the 6T, that is a hair thinner than the older OnePlus 6, which is nice. On the left, we have our volume buttons and our dual SIM card slot. On the right, we have our physical profile switcher that lets you slide it to go from ring to vibrate to silent quickly, as well as customize each of these profiles if you want in settings. And we have our power button. At the top, we have nothing. At the bottom, we have our USB-C port, no headphone jack to a lot of people's dismay, and our speaker. Now speaking of speakers, we're using the same Durac HD speaker as the OnePlus 6, and they sound like this.
That was awesome.
Now another difference between the OnePlus 6T and this McLaren Edition, we have the same Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 processor as the 6T, but we have 256 gigs of storage only and a whopping 10 gigs of RAM, which is nuts. Now powering all of this, we have a 3700 milliamp battery that is another unique difference to it over the OnePlus 6T, and that's how fast it charges. Using what OnePlus calls Warp Charge 30, there's an integrated circuit in the battery and the charger that allows for 30-watt charging. Now this means you can go from 0 to 50% in about 20 minutes. Now this is compared to the 20-watt charging on the regular 6T that goes from 0 to 50% in about 30 minutes, by the way. We also have Bluetooth 5.0, aptX HD for better audio streaming over Bluetooth, Wi-Fi 802.11ac, NFC, and Gigabit LTE. Some other fun differences that I think I should mention really quick come in the box. We have a fun little plaque, our McLaren branded charger, a carbon fiber case, an orange USB cable and headphone jack adapter, and this interesting booklet telling the history of McLaren. Something else I noticed that was novel is that when you first set up the device, it asks you to hold the phone's camera up to the different pages in this booklet, and it'll use AR to insert images and videos over specific images in the booklet for you to learn more about OnePlus and McLaren. For software, we have OnePlus's skin called Oxygen OS on top of Android 9.0 Pie that aims to be, quote, stock but better. And frankly, that's pretty accurate.
The device is super snappy, as they usually are, and is further optimized to have apps open faster than even Pixel devices. See my video linked below for that. Also, the look and feel is very much similar to a stock or Pixel-like version of Android, but there are a few noteworthy additions.
Firstly, there's a new skin for the McLaren Edition that the original doesn't have, aptly called McLaren, that makes everything black and orange, which I kind of like because it's like dark mode for the entire device, but just with a pop of color. You can change this though, if you want, to any of the normally included skins under Settings, Themes. Next, here are the apps that OnePlus has added to Android on all of their devices.
Community, which is an app basically for their forum that allows you to chat with other OnePlus members, as well as a section for tips and tricks. OnePlus Switch, which is an app to transfer all of your data from another Android phone to the new one, or vice versa. Then we have a gesture system that you can use for system navigation instead of the normal 3 Android buttons. It's very similar to the iPhone X series, and then you can swipe up from off the bottom of the screen to go home, swipe up and hold to get to multitasking, but to go back, you swipe up from the bottom right or left, and you can also swipe up and to the right to jump back to the last app quickly. OnePlus has also added some useful software feature additions too, in addition to a ton of customization options, so let's go through some of those really quickly. You can swipe to the far left home screen to get OnePlus's version of the Google Now page with similar recent apps, cards for things that they think are important, a place to add widgets to, etc. We also have a hidden drawer in the app drawer that you can get to by swiping from the left side of the screen that will show any hidden apps. You can add more to this secret drawer using the plus button at the top. We have a night mode to adjust the blue light as the sun goes down to help you sleep, reading mode that turns everything black and white and can be enabled to automatically turn on for specific apps if you want. We have various screen calibration modes, an option to hide the notch by turning the notification bar black, and an ambient display, which is their always on display, but it actually only works when you raise the phone or when you tap the screen. Then we have some utilities like gaming mode that stops notifications from interrupting your games, lets you answer calls via the speakerphone automatically, limit other app network usage for less lag in the game, disable automatic brightness, etc. A particularly clever feature that I found was the quick launch, which makes use of the in-display fingerprint sensor by giving you the ability to hold down when using the fingerprint sensor on the lock screen to bring up a set of customizable shortcuts. You can then swipe down to exit this and get back to the normal home screen. Parallel apps, which lets you have 2 of the same app on the device to allow for 2 separate logins. Think 2 Snapchat or WhatsApp accounts on the same device. This is similar to App Twin and other features on other manufacturers' phones, but it's nice to see that it's been added here. There's also an app locker, which lets you block access to apps without using a PIN code or fingerprint sensor. Scheduled power on and power off, a feature they mentioned during the launch called Smart Boost that uses daily usage to decide what apps to keep in RAM longer than others, thereby making them launch a lot faster. And finally, you can double tap the power button to get to the camera, which I always appreciate, as well as tap and hold it for a second to bring up Google Assistant, which is handy if you're using the system navigation gestures, since there's no more holding down on the home button to bring it up in that case. Or you can tap and hold it for 3 seconds to get to your normal power and reboot options.
Now, speaking of the camera, let's go through that next. Now, this is the exact same camera as the OnePlus 6T, and essentially is the same camera as the OnePlus 6. So just like the software section, this is gonna seem very familiar to anyone who watched my OnePlus 6T video.
We have the same camera as the OnePlus 6, honestly, so that means a dual camera setup that is comprised of a 16 megapixel f1.7 aperture with 1.22 micron pixels with optical stabilization and dual phase autofocus, and a 20 megapixel f1.2 aperture camera also with dual phase autofocus but with 1 micron pixels instead. These are paired with a dual LED flash. The camera UI has the following modes and options. We have the options for a timer, flash options, and the choice of 4:3, 19.5:9, and 1:1 aspect ratio, with no options for different resolutions. We also have Google Lens integration, which allows you to translate things using the camera, shop for items, search by image, etc. For video, it can shoot 720p in 30, 1080p in 30, 1080p in 60, 4K 30, and 4K 60, which are all accessible from inside the camera UI, interestingly enough. And we have slow motion video that can shoot in 1080p at 240 frames per second or 720p at 480. Also, we have a portrait mode that creates a more blurred background and is apparently tuned by a new photographer partner of theirs, along with their new studio lighting effects. The idea here is that it uses face detection to automatically not just blur the background, but adjust shadows and highlights on the subject's face to more mimic a professional lighting situation. In addition to this, the camera can use scene detection to automatically adjust contrast, brightness, and saturation. This is something it does automatically that cannot be turned off, but it's a lot more subtle, thankfully, than the AI scene detection features that we're used to seeing on other devices. We have Nightscape Mode, as OnePlus is calling it, and it's basically a long exposure shot like we have Night Mode on Huawei and Night Sight on the Pixel 3 and 3 XL, except that it doesn't actually hold the exposure as long. They did mention that there is something different about this as well, but they didn't make a point to say what. We have a Pro mode, which allows you to adjust things like ISO, shutter speed, etc. manually. A time-lapse mode, which allows you to create sped-up videos. And a panorama mode that allows you to stitch photos together to create one panoramic shot like we're used to. Going through the camera settings, we have the settings for location data storing as metadata in the image for organizational reasons, shutter sound controls, quick capture that takes a photo automatically when the camera is launched by double tapping the power button. This always seems like a bad idea to me, but maybe for somebody. We have a series of grid options, manual HDR controls, which allow you to manually turn HDR on or off. Personally, I think you should probably just leave this off so the phone uses it whenever needed, like every other phone. Auto night scene detection will turn on the Nightscape mode automatically if the scene is dark enough, instead of having to switch to it manually as a mode, which I think is useful. Watermark, which allows you to add a watermark to every photo. Smile capture, which will make the phone automatically take a photo if it detects a smile in the frame of the front camera only. Invert photo flips the front camera horizontal orientation to have it more mimic a mirror. Histogram controls whether a histogram is visible when using Pro mode. And horizontal reference line gives you a line to show you if the image is properly leveled during Pro mode.
Now the device itself costs $699, which is actually less than I thought they'd charge for it. The price hike on the Porsche design models from Huawei are much higher, even without a spec change. You can check more on that at this video link below. Considering the normal OnePlus 6T with the same storage of 256 gigs is $629, this is only a $70 difference to get what is essentially 2 gigs more RAM, 30% faster charging, and, well, a little orange in your life. Now it's up to you if that's worth it, but keep in mind that even at $699, it's way less than any other flagship out there, which I'm sure we all appreciate. There you guys, I hope that helped some of you guys answer some questions about the 6T or the 6T McLaren if you haven't seen my 6T video. And I hope it wasn't too annoying that a lot of this was similar from the 6T video if you did actually already see that. It's just the way it is. Please like this video if you liked it, share it as well. Also, don't forget to check out the rest of my channel. If you like what you see there, please subscribe and don't forget to tap the bell next to the word subscribe so you get notified when I do new videos. As always though, regardless, thanks for watching.